Hello, welcome back to the History Comic Series, Spectre 3rd Series, Part 2. We're going to be going over the second year of the Spectre. Now, the second year of the Spectre basically has two storylines that kind of happen at the same time a little bit and then feed off each other a little bit, or connect with each other off a little bit. So, of course, if you remember where we are now, is basically the first issue 13 of this year's storyline, starts off with Amy's funeral. The Spectre is in a terrible emotional state. Nate goes to Amy's funeral. He's basically being called the hero cop by the press because he's the one who found and stopped the serial killer who was killing they called him the Reaver, as a matter of fact, the serial killer. And he was the one who stopped the serial killer. Of course, the police department knows that Nate Kane basically executed the guy because of the forensic evidence. But they can't really do anything to him because he's the hero cop who blew it, who stopped the killer. So basically, they tell Nate that, you know what, we know you killed the guy, cold-blooded. So what we're going to do is, we can't touch you right now because you're the hero cop. What we're going to do is we're going to put you on every high-profile case. And when things go south, when you botch it up or it gets messed up, we're going to put all the blame on you, and then we're going to crucify you. So that's the state Nate Kane is in. Now, he doesn't show up much this year, but that's where he's at. We're introduced to a new father named Father Kramer. He's a priest at the Church of the Holy Spectre. And he was a character written by John Ostrander, I think, when John did Doom Patrol. When that series got canceled, I think John was able to bring him over into this series. He's going to be the new Amy character. He's the new main character, the focus for the Spectre. Although it takes a lot more time for these two to kind of form a bond. So, we have Madame Xanadu, who's kind of worried about Asmodeus coming back to get her. And then we have Asmodeus still around in the background. So, Jim Corrigan is really distraught and messed up. Amy's funeral happens. And the Church of the Holy Spectre just happens to be the nearest church. So the Spectre goes into the confession and talks to Father Kramer. Of course, Father Kramer doesn't know who he's talking to, and Corrigan's, asking him all these questions like, why does God allow this, and why does God allow that, and all this stuff. And basically, Father Kramer's trying to counsel him, but he says, you can't just get vengeance for all violence and stuff like that. And he's basically saying, look, there's this country, take the Civil War in this country of Lavadia, which is a fake country in the DC universe. And those people over there are in a civil war and they're killing each other, and you're not really even sure what it's for. It's just mankind being stupid. What's the purpose of that? How would you judge something like that? And he's trying to talk sense into the Spectre. Well, Jim's not hearing it. So he says, I don't know, but I'm going to go find out. And then Father Kramer goes, uh-oh, I don't think I was... And, Jim turns basically into the Spectre right before him. And Father Kramer's like, I don't think I knew who I was talking to. Now, Father Kramer kind of knows who the Spectre is because when he was a priest or counselor for the Doom Patrol, they had access to, superheroes and stuff like that. So, the Spectre goes to the country of Latvia, and there's in the middle of a battle during the Civil War. Now, one faction of the group is led by Count Vertigo. If you don't know who Count Vertigo is, he's kind of was like in Doom Patrol as well. I think Ostrander wrote him a couple times. He's an old Batman villain who's kind of been a villain, been a good guy, been a villain, been a good guy. And the other half is led by this Muslim general. So there's a civil war going on, there's a battle going on, and Vertigo destroys the opposing force with his Vertigo powers. But the Spectre catches him and is fixing to judge him. And Vertigo goes like, wait a minute, well, who are you to judge me? You're a Westerner, you have no business over here, this is a private affair. And you know what? The general on the other side, you know, he's doing the same thing. We're just trying to free our country from him. And so the Spectre goes, okay, well, I'm going to grab the general as well. So he grabs the general and Count Vertigo, and he wants to hear their cases as to why they're doing what they're doing. Of course, the general and the Vertigo guy fight with each other the whole time. Finally, the Spectre gets sick of their arguing and says, enough, you know what? I'm going to I'm going to judge the land itself. So he basically judges the land, and he sees so much blood in the soil from all the killings that have happened over the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years in this country. All the dead that he's resurrected from both sides are like trying to kill each other, and he's like, you know what? This country's just irredeemable. It's too steeped in blood. I'm going to judge it. So he basically nukes the country. He kills everybody in a big ball of fire, men, women, and children, innocent civilian, soldier alike. He kills everybody in the country in a big ball of fire except for Count Vertigo and the general. Of course, the Count Vertigo and the general are both broken-hearted, going, why did you do this? You know, what does this mean for the rest of the world? How can you judge this country when the rest of the world does the same thing? And the Spectre says, you know what, you're right. I'm going to go judge the rest of the world. So, the Spectre is basically going to go to place to judge and see about the bloodshed and judge all these places. So he ends up going to Northern Ireland, the conflict between the NRA and, you know, the British, which was big in the 90s. If you don't, I know it's kind of forgotten now, but it was big then. And one of the few loose plot lines that John kind of left hanging was eventually in the end of it, he meets a relative of his, James Corrigan or something like that, and James Corrigan curses him. It's like a plot line that's left unresolved. It's one of the few plot lines that's left unresolved, and I really wish he resolved it, or they could have done something with it. However, that's the last of that plot line you ever get to. He goes to the West Bank with the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and basically he gets involved in a thing where there's this Palestinian general who's killed a lot of Israelis over the years, but now the Israeli Defense Force is having to protect him because he's going to come over to their side. And so a lot of the Palestinian hardliners want him dead, and a lot of the own Israelis want him dead because of the, you know, the blood he killed. So he kind of gets involved in that. Meanwhile, while this is going on, the Phantom Stranger visits Father Kramer. And if you don't know who the Phantom Stranger is, he's a superhero that's been around a long time. You may have seen him in a few DC cartoons here and there. He's basically this guy, immortal guy, who has this kind of magic power to be able to do things. He's been around, I think, since the beginning of time, and he's shown up, and he's a mysterious type of hero. You don't really need to know his origin or anything to do with that. Well, he asked Father Kramer, you know, what did he tell the Spectre? What did they talk about? Of course, Father Kramer says, I can't tell you. It was under the seal of confessional. And the Phantom Stranger says, well, what if I told you he was the one responsible for blowing up that country of Latvadia, and he's going to continue to do it? And Father Kramer's like, I still can't tell you. So the Phantom Stranger says, okay, let me tell you about the origin of the Spectre. So, we get the origin of the Spectre. It's basically, the Spectre is an aspect of God. When God wants to do an aspect of vengeance or justice or something like that, he had an aspect for it. Now, the first aspect of God was Eclipso. And if you don't know who Eclipso is, he's a villain in the DC universe who, well, I'll just keep going. Eclipso was the aspect of God who raised the flood waters and flooded the earth during Noah's Ark. Eventually, Eclipso would agree that humanity was worthless and rebelled against God. So God put the essence of Eclipso in a black diamond and imprisoned him there forever. And he would have stayed in prison in there forever if man hadn't come along and screwed things up and freed him. We'll get into that later. So the next aspect of God was the Spectre. And the specter was the one who blew up Sodom and Gomorrah, and he was the one who killed all the firstborn children in Egypt when, in the time of Moses. And he was the one who blew up when Jesus was crucified, ripped the tapestry of the holy tapestries and all that kind of stuff. And then it was deemed that after Christ died, that any aspect of God on earth had to be bound to a human soul. That way they were a little bit more controllable, a little bit more pliable, and so therefore it was decided that, because the specter was just an unknown power at the time, you don't really know what it is, but from now on, after Christ's death, it would have to be bound to a human soul. And so therefore, since then, the specter force has always been bound to a human soul. Well, the Phantom Stranger doesn't get much from Father Kramer. So the Phantom Stranger knows that the specter is going crazy, so he's going to go recruit a team of superheroes to try to stop the specter. He recruits Zatanna, if you're familiar with Batman, or I think maybe the Injustice games. She's in some of those. This version of her is a little different. This is the early 90s when DC was revamping a lot of their heroes. He gets Dr. Fate, the female version Dr. Fate, not the original, and the Demon, who I think has been in a couple Batman things as well. The Demon's a cool character. He had his own comic out around this time. It would end up being Garth Ennis who would take over writing on the Demon and get his break from there. And then, if you don't know who Garth Ennis is, he's superstar writer, did Hitman, revamped The Punisher, a lot of stuff from the Punisher movies based on him. Preacher, the TV show, is based off Garth Ennis' Preacher comic. The Boys is based off of Garth Ennis' comic. Garth Ennis is like one of the most celebrated comic book writers of all time. He ended up writing the Demon, and my favorite, the Hitman. So basically, Phantom Stranger's recruiting these heroes to try to stop him. He tries to recruit Madame Xanadu, but she refuses to join. She says she looks into the future and sees that they're going to fail and fail miserably. Now, meanwhile, while all this is going on, the United States government is in a situation now where they can no longer tolerate the specter. Everybody knows the specter blew that whole country up. So they recruit this guy, this Professor Nicodemus guy, to find a way to defeat the specter in case they ever have to. And this Professor Nicodemus guy, he can like walk the corridors of dreams and read books there that have always been published or never been published or would have been published and stuff like that. So he finds out about the Spear of Destiny. And basically, he also, what he does is he goes to all the people who ever knew the specter. So he goes and contacts most of the Justice Society of America. Now this is before the 0 hour crossover would take place. So a lot of the Justice Society members are old and no longer superheroes. I think Alan Scott, the original Green Lantern, is a superhero. I think one or two others, for some reason, are still young and superheroes, but most of the Justice Society of America are no longer superheroes. They're old and retired. And so he goes to talk to them about their relationship with the Spectre, and he goes to talk to several of them. They each regale stories of the Spectre when they had their adventures back in the 40s and stuff like that. And it's some cool stuff. It's really cool. You get to see the Spectre in the 40s when he was doing his superhero type thing with a lot of other cool members of the Justice Society. But they all kind of agree that, Jim, he never kind of actually fit in. He never celebrated with them or anything like that. And the last they saw of him was after the Nazis fell. Because basically what happened was Professor asked him, well, why didn't, this always, you always come to question of, if they had superheroes in the 40s or the Spectre was around the 40s, why the hell didn't he just go kill Hitler? Well, you come to find out that Hitler had the Spear of Destiny, and the Spear of Destiny is the spear that pierced Christ's side while he was on the cross. And Hitler had it. And basically with it, Hitler was able to create this zone that kept all superpower and supernatural beings out of Europe. And so not even the Spectre or any superheroes could go in there and do anything against Hitler. And it is that powerful of an artifact. Well, so the Spectre can sense the whole time that something horrible was going on in Germany during World War II, but he was so mad he couldn't get in there. And then they come to reveal that after the war, when they found the concentration camps, the Spectre almost went berserk and just basically almost destroyed all of Germany and everybody, and they had to really talk him down from doing it, and then he kind of just left. So, and he really didn't have anything else to do much with the Justice Society after that. And this is where Professor finds out about the Spear of Destiny. So he tries to figure out where it's at, and he comes to find out that the Russians got it after Hitler killed himself, and then the Russians had it for a while, and then it went to some private collectors for a while, and then the American government sent in a team to get it, and ended up getting it, and it's just been stockpiled and stored in a government warehouse somewhere. And so he comes to find out, and he tells them that you got the spear, it's stockpiled in a warehouse somewhere. But there's one detail he's kind of forgetting, or he can't quite remember about the spear, which comes up in a little bit. Well, anyways, so all this is going on. So the Spectre goes, and he gets involved in the Israeli-Palestinian thing with the turncoat Palestinian, and it turns out Eclipso is there. Now, Eclipso is a supervillain. He was kind of like a goofy supervillain. He's pretty old. He's been around, I think, since the 40s or 50s as well. He was never considered an aspect of God back then. And he would show up from time to time and have a failed series or something failed. And basically what he does is his soul was entrapped in a black diamond. The diamond got destroyed by men, and it set him free. And if you have a piece of the black diamond, Eclipso possesses you, and you carry out your most wildest thing. Like if you want revenge on somebody or you hate somebody, you get that vengeance. It makes you do evil. It's basically what it is. Well, Eclipso was another DC Heroes for the 90s moment where they tried to relaunch some supernatural stuff because Marvel was having a lot of success with it. So they had a bunch of summer annuals for every superhero, not the Spectre though, where Eclipso fought the superhero. He would either take him over, or they'd have to fight him some way or something like that. And the Summer Annual series, this is how DC did their crossovers a lot. The Summer Annual series did pretty good, did okay. So it ended up Eclipso got his own series. And this is the first time that I can remember, except for the Joker, where a villain got his own series. And Eclipso, it didn't last that long. It only lasted like a year. It failed. It wasn't terrible. I actually got all the issues. It wasn't terrible. It just a different artist took over, and you can tell DC just didn't care about the book because it didn't do what they expected, and so it just kind of went to crap. And a different writer took over as well. And basically, the guy who freed Eclipso, the comic series is mostly based on him trying to gather superheroes to try to stop Eclipso. And that's basically the gist of that series. So the series got canceled, but it never really had a definitive ending. So John was able to take Eclipso and bring him in here, and that's when he made him like an aspect of God, the one that flooded the earth during Noah's time. So Eclipso knows that who the Spectre is. Spectre's not quite sure. So basically what happens is the Spectre and Eclipso fight, but Eclipso goads the Spectre and actually takes over him and possesses him. Not the Jim Corrigan part, but the Spectre part. Because he calls him brother and stuff like that. And he says, you know that the humans are worthless and they need to be eradicated and everything. And the Spectre power kind of agrees, so Spectre power kind of becomes possessed by Eclipso. Well, it's around this time that the Phantom Stranger and his group of heroes try to stop the Spectre. Because the Spectre is now going crazy. He's possessed by Eclipso. He's tearing stuff up. The heroes are getting their butts handed to them. Because you kind of have the combined power of Eclipso and the Spectre, and they just can't hold a candle to it. However, Madame Xanadu has a really good idea, has a better idea actually. She gets Father Kramer, and she gets, they go to where they're fighting the Spectre / Eclipso, and she gets Father Kramer to try to communicate with Jim Corrigan and try to bring him back. Because he's in there somewhere, he just doesn't care what's going on. The Spectre power has taken complete control. Father Kramer eventually reaches out to him, even though the Spectre brings up, you know, look, I can't get over Amy and all this kind of stuff, and why does this happen, and all this bloodshed stuff. So, eventually Corrigan retakes control of the Spectre and is able to dispel the Eclipso possession from the Spectre. So he goes to go have a final battle with Eclipso. Eclipso tries to goad him again, but this time Spectre doesn't fall for it, and he just utterly destroys Eclipso. And that's the last you see of Eclipso in the series, and that's the last you see of Eclipso in DC Comics for a very, very long time. I know they would eventually bring Eclipso back many, many years down the road, but Eclipso was, for all purposes, dead and gone. You know, comics reboot themselves, and they do so many things over the years. It's crazy. So, but for all intents and purposes, Eclipso has finally been destroyed, and he would stay destroyed for a long time. The Archangel Michael shows up, says, look, Spectre couldn't destroy the Earth. God wouldn't allow it. You shouldn't even have bothered trying to fight him. And there you go. Of course, the Phantom Stranger's like, well, you know, I didn't know, so there's that. Well, and then the Spectre and Father Kramer kind of reach out. Jim kind of reaches out to Father Kramer, and they start building a relationship. And so they build a friendship, and we get a little pause, and then the government has Superman. Superman comes in, and they give him the spear. They say, look, the Spectre, when he next shows up, we'll let you know, and you go take him out. And so there's this elemental named Naiad, who was once a human lady, who was killed by whalers or something. And so when she died, the Mother Earth Gaia brought her back to kind of redo the balance. And she's been going around as this huge water elemental, killing people on cruise ships, polluting the earth and stuff like that, and going after whalers and stuff. So she attacks the ship, and the Spectre finds out about it and goes to confront her. Of course, he enters her soul, and he starts having a conversation with Mother Earth. And while he's in her soul, Superman arrives with the spear. Now, Professor Hazard went back into the dreams to try to figure out what was it that I was missing. And he come to find out that the spear is cursed. Hitler put a magical curse on the spear to where whoever possesses it kind of becomes possessed by Hitler, or the paranoia of Hitler, or something like that. They start to become evil. Now, Superman is, you know, he's nigh invulnerable. He's all powerful just about. But Superman always has been susceptible to magic. And he's susceptible to the influence of the spear. So Superman basically attacks that elemental and wounds her with the spear. And of course, the Mother Earth lady's like, ow. And Spectre's like, what's going on? I just was wounded. So he comes out and he sees Superman holding the spear. Now the Spectre immediately realizes the spear and knows it's a problem. And he knows that Superman is kind of under the influence now of Hitler. And he's trying to talk him down to give up the spear, because the spear can kill the Spectre, and trying to calm down. And so they kind of have a standoff for a second. And then one of the coolest things in comic books happens. So what happens is Superman attacks the Spectre and kills him. And then he kills that Naiad for good measure. So Superman then goes back to the president and reports that he has done his job. And the president's like, oh, well, good job. Thanks. Glad we could depend on you. We'll take the spear back now. God dang it. And of course, Superman refuses to give him the spear and says, you world governments have mucked things up enough as it is. I'm keeping the spear. As a matter of fact, I'm running the world governments. You guys handle the day-to-day stuff, but I'm going to be the one that makes over the important decisions. And so, and then leaves with the spear. And so then, of course, President panics. He says, well, what do? Better call the Justice League. So the Justice League goes to try to stop Superman, and basically all the world's superheroes try to stop Superman, and Superman kills every single one of them. Now, mind you, now this is years before Injustice. Okay, the whole bad Superman and all that. This is years before that, and eventually Superman kills all the superheroes except for Batman. And you have Superman standing over the bodies of a lot of superheroes that he's killed. And Batman comes up behind him. And Superman's like, why didn't you come sooner? Why didn't you shoot me with that kryptonite bullet I gave you all those years ago? Look what I've done. And, you know, I've gone to evil. I've done all this. And I wish I'd never did it and all that stuff. But, you know, he couldn't stop himself. Well, it was at that point that Batman turns into the Spectre and gets the spear from him. It was basically Superman at the end made the right choice to give up the spear, and basically the Spectre was showing him a future, the future, what would have happened if Superman had not given up the spear, what Superman would have done. And it was really cool. It's brief, but it's really cool, and you get to see Superman just demolish a bunch of people, turn evil. And like I said, this was long before the whole Injustice, where you have a bad, evil Superman and all that stuff. And it was great to see, and it was done really good, I thought, and it was fantastic. So the Spectre gets the spear, and he throws it into this asteroid or comet that's kind of orbiting the Earth, so nobody else can get it. However, as you'll see later on, that doesn't quite work out. And so that basically wraps up. We have a kind of like an epilogue little story, issue 0. Now, issue 0 was part of the 0 Hour crossover. Now, DC Comics had a big event, 0 Hour, and basically the 0 Hour event was to clean up the continuity issues caused by Crisis of the Infinite Earth of the 80s, and bring a lot of superheroes that have aged or were too old, like the Justice Society, and kind of boot or vamp the universe, change powers for heroes, and give them a way to do that, and bring a bunch of new heroes in that weren't being used anymore, and try to fix up continuity issues and do everything right. Now, 0 Hour, at first it seemed to work, but it actually didn't. It kind of created more problems. Later on, DC would have to fix this again. However, the bad guy of the 0 Hour was basically Hal Jordan, who had turned evil. During the reign of Superman storyline, Coast City was destroyed. Hal Jordan went crazy from it. he basically killed all the other Green Lanterns and all the little Guardians and destroyed Oa and destroyed all the rings, and he took all the power except for one Guardian who managed to escape with one ring and gave the ring to Kyle Rayner, who would become the new Green Lantern. And Parallax was like this big boogeyman for a while in the DC universe, basically the Thanos of the DC universe. He was the bad guy in Zero Hour. The Spectre had a minor appearance in Zero Hour, but he couldn't really do much in it because they had to power him down or do something to where he just couldn't stop Parallax or Hal Jordan, whatever you want to call him. But he didn't really have a big role to play in it. But in every comic that month, every DC comic that month got a 0 issue instead of their normal issue. Normal issue would continue next month, but every issue for that month would be a 0 issue. And it would kind of tell like an origin or reboot the origin or retell the origin of the hero. And this Spectre issue basically kind of tells a little bit more about the origin of the Spectre. And it's basically the Spectre kind of feels some kind of presence in a hospital. Jim goes there and there's these babies and one of them's dying from AIDS or something. It was born with AIDS and is dying from AIDS. So Jim enters the baby's soul to find out what the deal is. And he comes to find out that the baby's the reincarnated spirit of this lady called Lady Bellatine. And she tells the Spectre that they've met many times before. As a matter of fact, she killed, the first time she met the Spectre, was because she killed this guy. She killed this wife and child and then killed the husband and the father of the child. And because she was imprisoning souls. Everybody she killed, she imprisoned their souls. And the husband, father, after he died, he demanded justice, and he became the first Spectre. He was over in India, though, so he had like a Hindu type look to him, where he had like 6 arms and held weapons and stuff like that. So he freed the souls of his wife and child and killed Lady Bellatine. Or before he killed her, she ended up dying and she got reincarnated, and so that guy would become the Spectre. And then it shows that over the years there were other Spectres. There was one in the Native American Spectre. There was one in Ireland, the Celtic one. There was one in Roman times. All this stuff. Every time this Spectre would meet a new version of Lady Bellatine, and he would end up stopping her and defeating her, and she would end up dying and being reincarnated again. And this is just the latest reincarnation. And she asked the Spectre, she says, look, I know the problem with humanity is their free will. They're able to choose, and this is what gets them in trouble. I've been doing this thing, this ritual, all these years, but every time a new Spectre comes up, they somehow find me, they somehow stop me, and it's been a long time for me to do this work. Help me with your power. We can kind of control humanity to where they only do good. It's basically turning humanity into puppets of hers, and they're not having any free will, kind of like the Stepford Wives type thing, but for everybody, and they don't get to make any choices. The Spectre's tempted by her offer, but he decides not to, and he basically ends up killing her, and so the little baby dies. But we learn a lot about the past incarnations of the Spectres. We don't know what happened to them yet. We don't know why they stopped being a Spectre and another one came along later on and took its place. We just know that there's one Spectre at a time. The first one was this Hindu guy where his wife and kid were killed by Lady Bellatine and their souls in prison. He ends up being killed by her. He becomes the first Spectre to be tied to a human soul. And he goes on and kills Lady Bellatine, frees her souls, and goes on to be a Spectre for a while. Something happens to him, and then later on another Spectre takes his place. And then, but for every region they're in, they take aspects of that. So the Celtic one took kind of like a Banshee type aspect. The Native American one took like a wolf god type aspect. They take on that. It's pretty interesting and it's pretty neat. But that basically is the second year. So you had a lot of stuff happen in this second year. Of course, the Spectre is in a little bit better place now. He's starting to build back with Father Kramer. And, but for every region they're in, they take aspects of that. So the Celtic one took kind of like a Banshee type aspect. The Native American one took like a wolf god type aspect. They take on that. It's pretty interesting and it's pretty neat. But that basically is the second year. Of course, the Spectre is in a little bit better place now. He's starting to build back with Father Kramer. You learn a lot about, you have a lot of guest stars, you have a lot of cool cameos, you have a lot of cool adventures. And although it may not be as hard-hitting and as good as the first year, I still find the second year to be very good, and it kept me on the edge of my seat because you were dealing with Eclipso, who I knew and liked, and you saw the relationship between them, and they end up having a showdown. And you have the heroes having a showdown with the Spectre, all these mystical, magical ones. And then you have the government trying to get rid of the Spectre. Then you have the whole thing with Superman and the Spear of Destiny. And then you have a lot of origin stuff mixed in where we can learn about a lot more about the origins of the Spectre. It's a fast-paced, very entertaining, very fast-moving, very informative year. While not as emotional, hard-hitting as the first year, it's still a really good year, and a lot of really good stuff happened in it. And it was entertaining the whole way along. So that was year 2 of the Spectre. Year 3 is going to go into a logical conclusion direction from where we're at. We've stabled up a little bit, but it's going to get a whole lot worse. So I'll see you for then. Until then, have fun.